Thomas, and this time I'm building the Rocketarium Exocet MM40. This is a scale model of the French anti-ship missile. So we'll go ahead and get started here and make sure that the kit is complete. Alright, the kit box is very packed here, and let's see if we can find the instructions underneath. Okay, so here's our instructions. We'll find the parts list. As we do so, check and make sure there's materials inside here. So, whoa. Okay, so we've got a little bit of decals that were folded in with the parachute. Okay, the parachute itself there. There's an applicator. Alright, whoa, more decals. Okay, and then we've also got a marking guide in here. We'll come to that later. So what we want here is this. So here's our parts list. Alright, so we've already found, looks like all the decals in there. A whole bunch of stripes. Okay, I've not found the Exocet decal itself yet, but we'll put those up here. Alright, we've got some nose weight down here, and then our shock cord and launch lugs. Okay, a motor mount kit and a baffle kit. Okay, we've got a body tube here, which appears to be pre-marked for many of the balsa pieces going on. Alright, and then we've got a bundle here of fins and of balsa trim pieces. Cotton applicator. Alright, inside this smaller tube I found the other set of fins. Alright, and then we've got a 3D printed nose cone. Okay, and like the primary body tube, this one also appears to be pre-marked. Alright, and then our parachute. Alright, I am not finding... Oh, there it is. Okay, so then we've got another vinyl strip there, and then this is what they're calling the Exocet decal. So it looks like we've got everything here. We'll go ahead and move this stuff out of the way and get started on the build. Rocketarium often packages sub-assemblies into their rocket kits, and they also sell these independently for use in your own rockets. So this is the BT-60 24mm motor mount. It fits both D and E black powder engines and can go up to an F-size composite engine. Inside the bag we've got a multitude of parts here. This is the motor mount itself. This is a spacer tube that will be used to measure where the engine block goes. It's not actually part of the assembly. This is a spacer for the motors. So this will, when finished, will fit an E-sized Estes black powder motor or the equivalent size composite. If you're using the shorter 24mm motors like the Estes D or the Estes C11, this goes ahead of the motor to take up the space that would otherwise be occupied by an E motor. All right, we have two centering rings, an engine block or thrust ring, an engine hook sleeve, and this just helps keep the engine hook from rattling around, and then the engine hook itself. To start, we need to put a ring of glue inside the forward end at about a 3/4 of an inch down. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take an applicator here and measure on my ruler where that's going to be. And I'm just going to put my thumb there as a quick measurement. And now I can just get some glue on my applicator here. Come back to where my thumb was. And if you need to, you can mark this. Okay, and so here's my motor mount tube. I'm going to stick my applicator into my thumb hits and just rotate that around a few times. So now we've got a ring of glue in there. And now stick the thrust ring in the aft end of the motor mount. And then the spacer tube here will go in, and now you just push this down until it's flush. And that will properly space where that thrust ring goes. You want to immediately take this back out in case there's some excess glue down there. And there's a thin film of glue. I got my glue a little bit deeper than 3/4 of an inch, but it's not a big deal because the thrust ring there has removed most of it. It's left a little film. Once it's dry, it will be just fine. Next, we need to measure from the aft end 3 3/4 inches or 95 millimeters, whichever you prefer. All right, and at that point, we're going to put a little slit. So you can mark this with a pencil ahead of time if you want, or you can just hit it with your knife. And the idea is that this should be right above where that thrust ring is. Okay, so if you're hitting some resistance there, you might be just on the thrust ring. Just bring it up a little bit. There we go. Okay, so you can see my knife coming through there. That just needs to be wide enough to put the forward hook part in. So the 90-degree angle there, not the fancier bent piece on the other end. So that's just going to pop right in there, like that. Okay, and so now, not only is the engine thrusting against that engine block or thrust ring, it's also thrusting against this. So it's just holding everything in there really, really nicely. Okay, now we need to make a few other marks. So we need to make a mark at 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters from the aft end. And you want to make this just slightly away from the engine clip so that it doesn't cover it later on. So I'm going to put that right here. And then we need another mark at 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters from the aft end. So that's going to be right here. Okay, we have 2 centering rings. One has a very small notch, one has a larger one. The end with the small notch is going to fit over the forward end like that. It'll just go over the forward part of the engine clip. Okay, and right now this is all being dry fit, no glue on it. The retainer ring here is just going to go over like this, and once that's dry, it just keeps this from moving back and forth like this, but still allows it to spring up to release the motor. And then the aft centering ring with the larger notch goes up to that 6 millimeter mark. So once it's all glued together, it's going to look like this. Okay, so from here, you can just move that first ring out of the way a little bit. Take your glue and run a bead around that. And this can be fairly heavy. Okay, now I'm going to just move that forward. Okay, and I'm just going to look around, make sure that I'm reasonably straight there. If you're off a little bit, it's not going to be that big of a deal. But try and get it as close to perpendicular as you can so that all sides are equal. Okay, and then you can just take your finger and smooth that into a nice fillet. Try not to get glue on the outer part of the ring. And then come to the other side, and that excess glue you can put in as a fillet there. If you need a little extra, that's fine. Okay, so that's really well glued into place there. If you need to make a little fine adjustment, that's good. Okay. And now you're going to do the same thing for that engine hook sleeve. So it's normally going to be at that mark. So what I'm going to do is just pull it over the mark a little bit, not too much, because I don't want to get glue on my mark until after I've got it into place. Once again, we're going to add a bead of glue. Okay, now this one is not bearing any thrust, so we don't need a whole lot of really strong fillets or anything like that. I'm just going to move this ahead, put it where my mark was there, and just once more I'll go ahead and make a fillet out of it. Again, this is not really having a lot of stress on it. And even if you get a little glue up here, it doesn't come in contact with anything. Okay, so that part's fine. And then down here, I'm going to move that ring right to the edge of the tube. And then we're going to add another bead of glue here. Now, I don't want to get glue in the notch, so be a little bit careful there. Alright, now I'll move this up to where my mark was. Right there. Okay, and also at this point you want to make sure that this is straight, going through all the rings. Okay, and then once more, make a fillet here. And again, try not to get any down in that notch. Okay, and I'm going to straighten that all out. And if you want, you can put another fillet here on the aft end. Okay, once more trying to keep it out of that notch so that the retainer clip can spring back and forth easily. Okay, and we'll just check and make sure that we're reasonably even all the way around. Okay, and at this point we will let this dry completely before inserting it into our rocket body tube. Rocketarium model rocket kits all share one thing in common, and that's that they come with ejection baffles, so you don't have to use wadding or dog barf or something like that to protect your parachute. Most of their kits are based around BT60 body tubes, and so this one here is the most common. However, with the exception of their BT20, all of these go together pretty much the same way. The BT20 ejection baffle is a little bit different just because it's so narrow. And so these come with the kits, but you can also buy these separately to retrofit into an old kit or to install into a scratch-built kit of your own design. So very quickly here, we'll just open this up. And they're pretty basic, and they come with their own instructions. Alright, so we should have a coupler and then two baffle plates. And whichever design you get, the idea here is that the holes in the baffle are offset. Either this way, where you have some in the center and some around the circumference, or in some cases it may be half on one side and half on the other. They all work in the same way in that they prevent the direct flow of hot gases from the ejection charge to the parachute, and instead make those gases bounce around and become turbulent in here, giving them time to cool off before reaching the parachute. So we will start by putting this screw eye into the forward baffle plate here, and it has a little hole just for doing this. And here I'm going to use just a little bit of wood glue. White glue will also work here. Wood glue is a little bit stronger and it also dries faster. And so I'm just going to put a little dollop right on that hole. And now I'm going to screw down the screw eye just until I can't see that top thread anymore. I don't want to go past it. I don't want the blank shank here down in the wood. Okay, and then on the back side, it's pushed some of the glue through, and I'm just going to add a little bit more to that, and that'll just give us a really good strong anchor here. Okay, now I'm going to let that dry for a little bit, and while that is drying, I'm going to put a bead of glue here around the inside edge of one end of the coupler, doesn't matter which. Okay, I'm going to smooth that around with my finger. If you get any on the outside, like I got there, just go ahead and wipe that off, because we don't want to increase the circumference of the coupler. Alright, then we're going to take our other baffle plate and just push that into the glue. Alright, and I want to put that in so there's just a little bit of a lip of the coupler above the plate there. Okay. Alright, and now I'm going to let both of those pieces just sit still and dry for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then I'll come back to put everything back together. My glue has pretty much completely dried on both sections now, and so now I'm going to put another bead of glue in here. Like that. And I'm going to spread this a bit thinner, but also a bit wider than I did the previous one. And now what we're going to do is I'm going to put this in edgewise and then flip it up like that, and then I'm going to pull it forward a bit and give it just a little bit of a twist. Okay, and then for the most part doing this pulls the glue into the spaces here and forms a little fillet. There's a little blank space here, and I'm just going to take this excess glue on my finger here and just put that right along the edge. Alright, now I'm going to turn it back over to the other side, and I'm just going to put a small fillet of glue in here, because this will have to take the force of the ejection charge on it, so you do want it well reinforced. And again, I'm just going to take a finger here and smear that around. Okay, let's see if we can get a close up here. Alright, so this will form a fillet in there, and on this side, simply pulling the plate forward help form a fillet around here. Now this just needs to dry for about half an hour, and then it will be ready to go into your model rocket. While I'm waiting for the glue to dry on the motor mount and on the coupler slash baffle, we can go ahead and put the nose weight inside the nose cone. This is 47 grams of clay, and if you prefer to use some other form of weight, say BB shot and epoxy, just make sure that you have at least the same amount of mass there. Otherwise, the rocket could become unstable in flight. Okay, so to do this, you can just pinch this into little balls or into little worms, however you want to do it, and just drop that down inside. And then periodically push that down. You can use a dowel. I'm using the handle of my hobby knife. Just be careful that you don't cut yourself with the hobby knife while you're doing this. Okay, now once you got all of the nose weight in there, pack it down as much as you can. This needs to be as far forward as you can get it and well entrenched so that it does not come loose. Alright, that looks pretty good. Okay, you want to take and clean this. The residue from the clay could interfere with your paint sticking. So I'm going to wash my hands and then wash the nose cone and then come back. Alright, my hands and my nose cone are now clean. And you'll want to be thinking about how you want to finish the nose cone here. Some people like the 3D printed effect. It gives it kind of a machined look. Although we do have this big seam here right along one edge. What I'm going to do is sand that and bring that down, and also bring down the ridges a little bit in the plastic there. And then I'm going to overcoat this with some fillable sandable primer. So I'm going to start out here with some 100 grit sandpaper. And that's knocked down most of the ridge there already. Okay, and I'm going to continue around to get kind of an even finish, and then I'll move up to some finer sandpaper. Okay, now before I stop with the 100 grit, I do want to test fit this into the body tube. Okay, and that's actually pretty loose, so I don't need to do any sanding down there. Okay, now I'm going to move to 150 grit and just do the whole surface again here. Okay, and then I'm going to finish that with some 220 grit. Alright, so now I've got a lot of scratching and a lot of dust and such, so I'm going to use a little bit of rubbing alcohol here and just wipe this down. Okay, so most of the printing lines are now gone. You see just a little bit there. I've got a few small holes here that need to be filled in, but we'll do that with the filling primer. So I'm going to take this off camera, put a few coats of primer on it, and then we'll come back and continue with the rest of the build. Soon we'll be ready to mount the engine mount and the coupler and baffle into the body tubes here. Now we need to orient ourselves. Okay, so on the larger of the two tubes, we're going to have some marks here. So the narrower marks like this, this will be for the aft fin. Okay, and then this will be a channel right here. And then this will be for the main fin. And then another channel mark, and this is going to mate up with the channel marks on the smaller body tube. Okay, so you need to make sure those are going to line up the way they need to. And note that those channel marks end before you reach the forward end of the forward tube. So if it's oriented like this, you're backwards. Okay, so that needs to be like this. Okay, and then let's see here. Right here and up here, those are for the launch lugs. And when I go to put my engine mount in, I will line up the engine clip with those launch lug lines. Alright, so let's take a look here. This looks like it's dry enough to go in. So I'm just going to dry fit the motor mount first, so that we don't have any surprises when we're ready to put it in. And that, there we go. Okay, so maybe I need to, it's just grabbing at the very edge, so I'm just going to take my fingernail here and kind of chamfer that outward. Okay, and then we're going to put a ring of glue, let's see here, at 89 millimeters from the aft end. And so here you can use the applicator that came with the kit. Alright, and what I'm going to do here is, first of all, uncap my glue so I can just dip this in. Alright, we'll move that out of the way. Okay, so on my applicator, I'm just going to take my ruler here, alright, and measure 8.9 centimeters or 89 millimeters there. And I'm going to mark with my thumbnail here down at the end where that is. And now I'm going to take some glue. Now I'm going to take some glue on my applicator. I'm going to insert this in, but not touch anything yet until my thumbnail hits, and then I'm going to rotate that around inside. Take a look here. That's actually a good coating right there. And now I'm going to partially insert the motor mount, get some more glue here, and now I'm going to put glue just right inside the aft edge. And if you get a little bit on the motor mount, it's no big deal. Okay, and I'll bring that all the way around here, so that now when I push this in, the forward ring will go through the forward ring of glue, and the aft ring will go through the aft ring of glue. So now I'm just going to put this together. Okay, get past that little lip that we had. Again. Alright, I'm just going to kind of tuck this in, and now the motor mount tube should be flush with the body tube. So you can just take a ruler or other flat edge there, put it in that way. Okay, and we can let that dry for now, and then we'll come back and put the baffle into the body tubes as well. While the motor mount is drying inside the lower body tube, we're going to go ahead and install the baffle. And first we just need to find its halfway point, which is going to be at about 2.5 centimeters. So just mark a little line there. And now we're going to take the shock cord. It's in the same little bag here with the launch lugs. Set the launch lugs aside for the moment. Okay, and we'll just unwrap the shock cord here. And we're going to tie that onto the eyelet here of our ejection baffle. Okay, tie a double knot or 2 half hitches into that. Okay, and then pull it from multiple directions so that knot gets cinched down tight. Alright, and then if this is too long, go ahead and trim it back a little bit so we don't get it caught between a body tube and the coupler there. That's good. Okay, and now we're going to take the upper body tube, and this is going to go into the aft end of the forward body tube. And so first I'm just going to slide the shock cord through. Okay, and then I'm going to put a ring of glue inside here. I'm going to try and avoid hitting the shock cord. So if we kind of keep it centered there, it's going to be mostly clean. Okay, and I'm just going to hang this down so the shock cord is just going down through the center. I'm going to find my mark right here. Okay, and now I'm just going to push this in, rotating it a little bit to get a good spread of the glue, right up until we meet that mark. Okay, and now I'm going to let this dry upright with the shock cord hanging down so that it stays out of any residual glue there. So I'll set this aside to dry as well. The glue is dry on the baffle and on the motor mount here. And if you're following along with the directions, as you should be, you may have noticed that in the directions they call for putting the baffle into the longer tube first. And the only reason I didn't do that was because I wanted to be able to have both the motor mount and the baffle drying at the same time without working on one and interfering with the other. So now I will go ahead and combine the two tubes. Now first I'm just going to make sure that everything's lining up here. Alright, so all of these fin and channel marks need to line up, and they do. Okay, and check and make sure that there's nothing down here. Yep. Alright, so we'll go ahead and apply some glue to the inside of the forward end of the lower body tube here. Okay, and then we're just going to kind of twist this as it goes in and then line up those marks. Okay, and they should align all the way around. Okay, now it looks like we've got just a little bit off here. I'm going to try just rotating that. Yeah, okay, so like one of them might be a degree or two off from the others. But eventually they line up. And I'm going to hold this here so it doesn't try and push itself apart, probably 30 seconds to a minute, and then we'll come back. While the body tube is still being glued together, we can look forward to what we're going to have to do with the fins. Now, what the instructions recommend is tapering all the fins using this guide here. And that will give you the closest scale approximation of the real missile. They do indicate that you can simply round off the leading edges. However, and that's something I actually prefer to do most of the time, but we've got these channel pieces here, okay, and in order for these to correctly fit, So these are going to actually overlap the fin a little bit here. Those are cut for the tapered fin here. So this little slot's meant to go on a taper here. If you decide that you're just going to round this off, then what you'll need to do is make a butt joint here. Okay, so you would have to cut off the little prongs there, and then this would get butt jointed to your fin there. Okay. Also, you want to be thinking about how you want to prepare these. So at minimum, you're going to want to sand and shape all the fins first. And then after that, you'll probably want to consider whether you want a sanding sealer, or if you want to rely on the primer, if you want to use a wood filler, whatever your favorite fin treatment is. All right, you could even paper the fins if you wanted to. But you'll need to do all that after you shape the fins, but before we put them on. I've decided to go ahead and do the full trim here and taper all of the fins. And so we're going to use this marking guide here, and these two here are for different faces of the fin here. So both of these are for the large fin. All right, and so we're just going to center this within it like this. Okay, and so we're going to have a mark here, a mark here, all right, and one down here, and one over here. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing by flipping this over. Okay, and then mark on this side like this. Okay, and once again there and there. Okay, and then what we're going to do is take a ruler, and I'm going to draw lines between those markings there. And as you can see here, the trailing edge of these fins is going to have much less of a taper. Okay, so the longer taper is going to go on the leading edge. Alright, so that's one of the main fins. For the aft fins, we don't have as much work to do. But the same way here, we're going to have a marking guide here for each face. So once again here, I'm just going to center that. Alright, make a mark there, a mark here. And then flip that over and center it on this guide. Okay, and then we'll draw lines on this in the same manner. Just connect our marks. Like that. Okay, so here again, this will be the leading edge of the forward fin and the leading edge here of the aft fin. Now on the aft fin, the trailing edge has no tapering, so it's just going to be square on the back. I'm going to mark all of the rest of the fins here and then come back. Now that I have all the fins marked, we'll go ahead and start sanding these. And I'm going to start with some 100 grit sandpaper on the forward fins. Since these are made of basswood, they're going to take a little bit more work. When we do the balsa fins, you might want to go straight to 150 grit. So I'm just going to start, like I do any other fins, I'm just going to start rounding the edges here. Although I'm not really going to round them so much as just flatten them. And then that will turn into a more gradual taper as we go along here. Now this trailing edge is going to be fairly straightforward because it's almost the same size all the way. It just goes out a little bit here. And so this will have a fairly steep taper to it. Alright, now as I continue doing this, I'm going to put more force out here so that we get a nice even taper all the way across, which means that this is actually going to have to be more tapered on this side than it is over here. Okay. As I'm sanding right now, I'm actually getting more force in the middle, simply because that's where it tends to lead me just the way I'm holding everything here. So I'm going to apply more effort over here to the corner by the root edge. Okay, and just be sure to do this on both sides fairly evenly. So switch sides often. And as with any other, just check it in cross-section periodically to help ensure that you are getting an even, symmetrical type of airfoil here. Alright, and I'm just slowly working my way back to my mark. Once we get to the mark here, then we'll check in the middle, and if we still have some edge here, then we're going to focus more on the edge here. But we don't want to sand past our mark, or at least not very far past that. Just enough to keep it even. Now if you wanted to and have the skill at it, you might consider using something like a Dremel or other hobby rotary tool and a sanding drum to at least do the original shaping on this. Now if you haven't done a lot of that and you want to try it, get some scrap wood to practice on first, because it's really hard to put the sawdust back once you've sanded through it. Alright, so now if I look at the edge itself, I'm getting pretty close to the end of the taper here in the middle, but again I need to put some more pressure on the edges here. And again, that's normal, alright, since most of us tend to kind of cup these in our hands as we do it, it tends to do the middle first. Alright, so I'm going to focus over here on the edge, put a little more pressure there. Okay, as we don't want to do it too much in the middle, or we'll end up with a kind of a dip in here that we don't want. So just go down until you get to a knife edge there. Okay, we're almost back to the line. All right, need a little more on this side. Okay, let's check our cross section. Looks pretty symmetrical. So we're almost there. Okay, so that's got the coarse shape now to it. I'm going to come over here to the other side and do this taper. This is going to be much the same, except we're going to be doing it over a much wider surface area. Okay, so I've already got the edges flattened off there. So I'm going to start in putting a lot more pressure over here. This is going to take a lot more work on that edge than down here. Getting there on the front. Alright, I'm coming back to the line here again. Okay, check it in cross section. We need a little more off here. Okay, and I'm just going to go through and kind of neaten everything up a little bit. Alright, and now I'm going to switch to 150 grit and smooth this out a bit more. Okay, so that looks pretty close. May need a little bit more tuning up here. Okay, and then as a further check, we can do a test here with our channels. Okay, and that shows it's going to need an even finer edge on here than what I've got, so I'm just going to go back to my 100 grit and do some more shaping. Okay, and if we need to, we can do a little more trim on both pieces when we go to put this together. Okay, you can see how I'm kind of bending that a little bit, and that's a danger as we get more and more tapered here. It's also going to be weaker. All right, that looks pretty good there. Bring that down a little bit. Okay, and we'll want to do the same thing with the channels that go to the aft fins. So I'm going to set that one aside for the moment. Okay, now our aft fins are made of balsa, so they are going to sand faster. And I had originally intended just to start with the 150, but I think I'm going to start with 100 here, because these are fairly thick yet. And we're having to do a lot of removal here. Okay, so just like we started with before, start by just taking those edges off. And then just taper them back toward the line. Lopsided here. We're going to have to sand some more down on this edge. Okay, now that's still a little bit lopsided there, and I may not be able to fix that completely. I'm going to go to 150. So I'm not taking off as much. Okay, so if we put this one in one of the shorter channels, and again, we can fine-tune these when we actually do the final assembly on them. Okay, well, that looks pretty good there. And then we would also have this going over the aft taper like that. Okay, so this is going to go like that and like that. So probably going to need to do a little fine-tuning of both the fins and the channel on these, but you get the idea here. Okay, I'm going to do the other fins off camera and then come back. Here all of the fins have been shaped and sanded with 150 grit sandpaper, and now what I'm going to do is give a couple of coats of sanding sealer to these as well as to the channels here. And so when I come back here, everything will have been sealed and sanded and resealed and resanded, and after that we will start in on attaching the fins and the channels.